Brother's betrayal plus destroyed family home. My brother secretly rented out our parents' house while they stayed with me during mom's cancer treatment. Tenants destroyed 32 years of memories. Legal battle complete. One job. He had one job. Check on the house. Instead, he rented it to strangers and watched them destroy 32 years of our family's life. I'm 34 years old. I have a decent job, a wife who puts up with my workaholic tendencies, and until recently, I thought I had a pretty good family. My parents are 67 and 64. Good people. The kind of parents who showed up to every school event, helped me move into my first apartment, and still call just to see how I'm doing. My older brother is 38. We were never super close growing up, 4-year age gap, different interests, but I always thought of him as solid. Responsible. The kind of guy who figured things out, even when times got tough. I was wrong about that last part. So wrong. This story starts about 14 months ago. My mom got diagnosed with a serious illness. I won't go into specifics for privacy, but the treatment was going to be extensive, 10 to 12 months of specialized care. The problem was that the hospital she needed was 3 hours from where my parents live, in my city. The treatment required weekly visits, sometimes multiple times a week. My parents couldn't afford to travel back and forth, and they certainly couldn't afford to rent an apartment near the hospital. I didn't even hesitate. Move in with me, I told them. I have space. Stay until mom is better. My wife and I had bought a 4-bedroom house a few years back, thinking about future kids. We had 2 spare bedrooms sitting empty. It made sense. My parents were grateful, almost embarrassingly so. My dad kept saying he didn't want to be a burden. My mom cried when I told her not to worry about anything except getting healthy. Here's where my brother comes into the picture. He lives about 20 minutes from my parents' house. The arrangement seemed simple. He'd keep an eye on the place while they were gone. Check in once a week, grab the mail, mow the lawn occasionally. Easy stuff. The kind of favor any decent son would do without question. Don't worry about anything, my brother told them the day before they left. Focus on mom's health. I've got the house covered. My parents felt lucky. 2 good sons. One taking them in during a medical crisis, the other watching over their home. They drove away from that house, the house they'd lived in for 32 years, the house where they raised both of us, the house they'd paid off just 5 years ago, believing everything would be fine. The house meant everything to them. Not because of its monetary value, though it was worth around $285,000, but because of what it represented. 32 years of their lives lived within those walls. My childhood bedroom with the height marks still on the doorframe. My dad's workshop in the garage, where he taught me how to use a saw and we built bookshelves together when I was 8. My mom's garden in the backyard, 20 years of careful cultivation, rose bushes grown from cuttings she took from her own mother's funeral flowers, tomato plants that produced the same variety every summer that I remember eating as a kid. Before they left, my dad walked through every room one last time. I saw him run his hand along the kitchen counter, the same one he'd installed himself when I was in high school. He thought he was leaving it in good hands. The red flags I should have seen. Looking back, the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. Month 2. My wife had to travel to my parents' city for work. She offered to swing by the house, just to check on things. She texted my brother to let him know. Don't bother, he replied. I was just there yesterday. Everything's fine. That seemed considerate at the time. Why make her go out of her way when he'd already handled it? Month 4, one of my parents' neighbors, an older woman named who'd lived next door for 20 years, called my mom. Are you selling the house? She asked. I saw a moving truck out front last week. My mom was confused. She called my brother. The neighbor must be confused, he said. Probably saw a delivery truck on the wrong street. These things happen. Everything's fine. Month 6. My dad tried to log into the home security camera app on his phone. He'd installed a basic system years ago, mostly to keep an eye on the front porch for package deliveries. All 4 cameras showed offline. Power surge, my brother explained when my dad asked about it. Must have fried something. I'll fix it next week. He never fixed it. My dad mentioned it once or twice more, but my brother always had an excuse. Busy with work, waiting for a part, would get to it soon. Eventually, my parents stopped asking. They had bigger things to worry about. My mom's treatment was grueling. Some weeks she could barely get out of bed. My dad spent every waking moment either caring for her or sitting in hospital waiting rooms. They trusted my brother. Why wouldn't they? He was their son. The discovery. Month 11. My mom's treatment was declared a success. The doctors were optimistic. After nearly a year of fighting, she was finally healthy enough to go home. I'll never forget the drive back to their house. My parents sat in the back seat of my car, holding hands like teenagers. My mom kept talking about her garden, wondering how the roses had fared through the summer, planning what she'd plant in the spring. My dad talked about getting back into his workshop, finishing a cabinet he'd started before they left. The street looked normal when we turned onto it. Same houses, same trees, same feeling of quiet suburban peace. Then we saw their house. The front yard was destroyed. The grass was dead, not just brown from drought, but dead in that way grass gets when it's been neglected for months. Trash littered the lawn. The white picket fence my dad had built by hand had sections missing, others broken and hanging. And the windows had wrong curtains. Cheap, dark curtains that my parents had never owned. There was a car in the driveway. A car none of us recognized. My dad's face went white. My mom grabbed his arm. I pulled up to the curb, my heart pounding. We walked to the front door. My dad knocked. A stranger opened it, a man in his 30s wearing a stained t-shirt, cigarette dangling from his mouth. "Who are you?" my dad asked, his voice cracking. The stranger looked annoyed. "I live here. I rent this house." I thought my father was going to collapse right there on the porch. I had to grab his arm to steady him. "That's impossible," I said. "These are my parents. They own this house." The stranger shrugged. "I rent it from some guy. Been here 9 months. Got a deal, cash, no lease, no questions." 9 months. He'd been living in my parents' house for 9 months. The damage. I called my brother immediately. He didn't answer. I called again. And again. Voicemail every time. The stranger, the tenant, seemed genuinely confused when we explained the situation. He wasn't a bad guy, just someone who'd found what he thought was a cheap rental. He let us look inside. What we saw destroyed my father more than any physical blow ever could. The house was ruined. Not just messy or dirty, ruined. There were holes in the walls, fist-sized holes that had never been repaired. The carpet was stained and burned in spots. The kitchen cabinets were broken, doors hanging off hinges, one completely ripped from the wall. The smell hit you the moment you walked in. Cigarettes, pet urine, something rotting somewhere. My mom's garden. They'd poured concrete over it. Concrete. 20 years of roses and tomatoes and memories, buried under a gray slab because someone needed a parking spot for their motorcycle. My dad's workshop was empty. Not reorganized, not messy, empty. The tools he'd collected over 40 years, gone. The workbench he'd built himself, gone. The shelves we'd made together when I was 8, the ones where he'd let me hammer in the nails even though I bent half of them, torn down and thrown in a pile in the corner like garbage. I found the family photos in the garage. My parents had left some behind, the ones that weren't special enough to bring but too meaningful to throw away. Old school pictures. Holiday snapshots. My grandparents' wedding photo. The tenant had found them in a closet and thrown them all in the garage, in a corner where the roof leaked. They were water-damaged, stuck together, some completely destroyed. My father built that workshop with his own hands when I was 8. I have photos of us building shelves together. Some stranger tore it apart for scrap. My brother let that happen for $1,800 a month. I've never seen my father cry. Not at funerals. Not when he lost his job 20 years ago. Not when his own mother passed. But he sat in that destroyed living room, looking at those water-damaged photos of us as kids, and he sobbed. Deep, racking sobs that shook his whole body. My mom put her arm around him, but she was shaking too. She'd just spent a year fighting for her life, and she came home to this. My brother did that to them. The confrontation. My brother finally answered his phone 3 hours later, after I'd left him 17 voicemails and about 30 texts. "What did you do?" I asked. My voice was calm. I was beyond anger at that point. I was in some kind of shock. He got defensive immediately. I needed money. My business was failing. I was going to fix everything before they came back. The tenants were supposed to be good people. You rented our parents' house without permission and let strangers destroy it. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. You have your good job, your nice house. I had nothing. I was drowning. Parents would have helped me anyway if I asked. Then why didn't you ask? He said, parents would have helped me if I asked. Then ask. Pick up the phone and ask. Don't steal their house and let strangers destroy it while Mom is fighting for her life. He hung up on me. The investigation. Over the next few weeks, I pieced together exactly what had happened. My brother had rented out my parents' house starting about a month after they left. He found the tenants on Craigslist. No background check. No formal lease. No security deposit. Just cash, $1,800 a month, paid directly to him. The tenants weren't just neglectful. They were running some kind of illegal operation out of the house. I never got the full details, and honestly, I didn't want to know. That's why the damage was so extensive. That's why they'd poured concrete over the garden. They needed the space. My brother collected approximately $16,200 over 9 months. He spent none of it on the house. He never hired anyone to do repairs. He barely even checked on the place. I found text messages between him and the tenants. By month 4, he knew the house was being damaged. One of the tenants had texted him about a broken window. My brother's response, "Just clean up before the owners return." He collected cash for 9 months. $16,200. That's what our family home was worth to him. That's what 32 years of memories cost. Less than $2,000 a month to betray everyone who ever loved him. The tenants found family photos in a closet and threw them in the wet garage like trash. Our childhood. Our grandparents. Our whole history in a pile of garbage. And my brother's response was, I was going to fix it. When I confronted him with the evidence, he tried to claim he'd been planning to use the rental money to pay for repairs. But his bank records told a different story. The money went to his failing business, a sporting goods store that had been hemorrhaging cash for years, and to something else he'd never told any of us about, gambling debts. My brother was a gambler. Not a casual poker night kind of gambler, but the kind who owed serious money to serious people. He'd been hiding it for years. The rental income from our parents' house had gone straight to paying off those debts. I don't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the realization that I'd never really known my brother at all. Update 1. The fallout. My parents were devastated in a way that went beyond words. My father stopped sleeping. He'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, running through everything in his mind. I trusted him, he kept saying. He's my son. I trusted him. My mom's health started declining again. The stress triggered complications. Her doctors were worried. She'd spent a year fighting to survive, and now she was losing ground because of what my brother had done. We got estimates for the repairs. The minimum to make the house livable again was $67,000. That included structural repairs, new carpet, fixing the kitchen, repairing the walls. It didn't include replacing 30 years of accumulated possessions, tools, and memories. It didn't include replanting a 20-year-old garden. It didn't include anything that actually mattered. Mom's garden. She spent 20 years growing that garden. Roses from her mother's funeral. Tomatoes we ate every summer. They poured concrete over it for parking. My brother knew and did nothing. My brother refused to pay. I don't have the money, he said. I'm broke. The business failed completely. I have nothing. I didn't believe him. I couldn't believe him anymore. Update 2. The legal battle. I had to convince my parents to press charges. They didn't want to, even after everything. Some part of them couldn't accept the idea of taking their own son to court. But I pushed them. Not out of anger, though I had plenty of that, but because I knew my brother would never face any consequences otherwise. He'd walk away from this like he'd walked away from everything else in his life, leaving other people to clean up his mess. We filed a police report, unauthorized rental of property, fraud. We also filed a civil lawsuit for damages. My brother hired a cheap lawyer, one of those guys who advertises on bus benches, and tried to claim implied permission. His argument was that since he was asked to watch the house, he had implicit authority to make decisions about it. The judge didn't buy it for a second. Watching a house does not mean renting it and keeping the proceeds, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. That's not even a remotely reasonable interpretation. My brother was ordered to pay $67,000 in damages plus the $16,200 in rental income he'd stolen. A total of $83,200. His lawyer tried to argue that he couldn't pay, that he had no assets, no income, nothing. But my attorney is good. Really good. She dug into my brother's finances and found what he'd been hiding. He'd transferred his car to his girlfriend's name 3 weeks after we confronted him. He had an undisclosed bank account with $12,000 in it, money he'd skimmed from his failing business before it went under. He owned a storage unit full of inventory from the store that he hadn't declared. The court found him in contempt for hiding assets. That's when things really started to fall apart for him. Update 3. The enforcement. Wage garnishment was ordered. Whatever job my brother got, A portion of his paycheck would go directly to paying off the judgment. The problem was, he couldn't keep a job. His first employer found out about the garnishment and the court case. They fired him, not officially because of that, but everyone knew the real reason. His second job lasted 3 weeks. His third, 2 months. His girlfriend left him. She'd been with him for 4 years, had let him transfer the car to her name, had believed his excuses. But when the truth came out, all of it, including the gambling, she was done. She packed up and moved out while he was at work. He called me once, about 6 months into the legal battle. I almost didn't answer. "Are you happy now?" he asked. "You've destroyed my life." "I destroyed your life. You stole from our parents. You let strangers trash their home while Mom was fighting cancer. I was trying to survive. You were gambling. You were lying. You were stealing from your own family." He started crying on the phone. Not the deep, genuine sobs I'd seen from my father, but the kind of crying that sounds more like self-pity than remorse. "I made a mistake," he said. "I know I made a mistake. But you're treating me like a criminal. You committed crimes. That's what makes someone a criminal." He hung up. I haven't spoken to him since. Update 4. The restoration. Insurance covered some of the repairs. Not all of them. There were exclusions and deductibles and the usual bureaucratic obstacles, but enough to make a dent. The rest came from family and community. I spent every weekend for 3 months driving to my parents' house to help with repairs. My father and I worked side by side, just like we had when I was a kid. We patched walls. We painted. We replaced damaged fixtures. We built new shelves for his workshop, not the same as the old ones, but solid and functional. The neighbors pitched in. The woman next door, the one who'd called about the moving truck, organized a volunteer day. People showed up with tools and supplies. The local hardware store heard about what happened and donated materials. It was one of those small-town moments that reminds you people can be good, even when your own family lets you down. My dad built a new workshop. Different from the old one, but his. He hung his remaining tools on the wall, bought a few new ones to replace what was stolen, and got back to work. Last month he finished a cabinet that he'd started before they left. It took him over a year, but he finished it. The garden is coming back. My mom spent weeks breaking up the concrete, hauling it away piece by piece. She replanted roses, different varieties this time, because the ones from her mother couldn't be recovered. She planted tomatoes from seeds she ordered from a heritage catalog. "They won't be the same," she told me. "But they'll be mine." Not everything could be fixed. Some things are just gone. Photos that can't be reprinted, tools with sentimental value that can't be replaced, memories that have been tainted forever. But the house looks almost normal now. If you didn't know what happened, you might not notice anything wrong. But I notice. Every time I see the new paint covering old damage, I remember what's underneath. Final update. The bitter victory. We had a family dinner at the house last week. The first one in over a year. My parents, my wife, and me. Sitting around the table in the dining room that had been repaired and repainted, eating off dishes that had to be replaced because the originals were broken or missing. There was an empty chair where my brother used to sit. My mom looked at the chair at one point. She started to say something, then stopped. Her mouth opened and closed, and then she just shook her head and looked back at her plate. My dad stared at his food for most of the meal. He ate mechanically, without tasting anything. Every once in a while, his eyes would drift to that empty chair. Nobody mentioned my brother. Nobody had to. We fixed the walls. We planted new flowers. We built new shelves. But there's a hole in this family that no contractor can repair. My brother isn't here. He'll never be here again. Not because we banned him, because none of us know how to look at him anymore. He made a choice. $16,200, and he threw away his whole family. The house looks almost normal now. But every time I see that new paint covering old damage, I remember what's underneath. Some things you can fix. Some things you just learn to live with. My dad asked me last week if I think my brother is sorry. I said I don't know. But I know this, he's not sorry he did it. He's sorry he got caught. He's sorry he has to pay. He's sorry his life fell apart. But he's never once apologized to Mom for adding stress while she was sick. Never apologized to Dad for destroying his workshop. Never apologized for the photos, the garden, the memories. He apologized for the situation. Like it happened to him. Like he's a victim too. That's not sorry. That's just words. And words don't rebuild a workshop. They don't replant a garden. They don't give my father back the tears he cried in his own destroyed living room. Some debts aren't measured in dollars. And some can never be repaid. The judgment against my brother still stands. He's made a few payments, small ones, garnished from whatever temporary work he can find. At this rate, he'll be paying it off for 20 years. My parents will probably never see all of that money. But that was never really the point. The point was that actions have consequences. The point was that you can't betray the people who love you and walk away clean. The point was that some things matter more than money, and destroying them should cost something. I don't hate my brother. I wish I did. Hatred would be simpler, cleaner. Instead, I feel something more like grief. I'm mourning the brother I thought I had, the family I thought I belonged to. I'm mourning the version of my childhood that felt untouchable, the one where my older brother was someone I could look up to. My parents are healing, slowly. My mom's health has stabilized. My dad has found some peace in his workshop, in the simple act of building things with his hands. They don't talk about my brother much. When they do, it's in short, clipped sentences, like they're afraid to say too much. Last Sunday, I helped my dad hang a new picture in the living room. It's a photo of my parents, my wife, and me, taken at the house after we finished the repairs. We're standing in front of the new garden, smiling. There are only 4 people in that picture now. My dad looked at it for a long time after we hung it. Then he put his hand on my shoulder. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged him. The house is rebuilt. The family is smaller. And somewhere out there, my brother is living with the consequences of his choices. That's not justice, not really. Justice would mean none of this ever happened. Justice would mean my father never had to cry in his own living room, my mother never had to watch her garden get paved over, I never had to learn that my own brother was capable of such betrayal. But it's the closest thing to justice we're going to get. And sometimes, that has to be enough.